If you already know what retrospective is, then probably you can have a good discussion. If you don't know, then ask your partner what retrospective is. And this session is about what retrospective is and how can you improve your retrospective for your teams. So how about if we take 1 minute, or let's say give us 2 minutes to talk among yourself, introduce yourself to your partner on the table, and talk about retrospective. Come on.
Hey, Sumit.
You're good.
How are you? Chinmay. I'm Ravi.
No, okay.
I was in her school. I've seen you a lot. I'm in HS business.
Okay.
I've heard, I've met a lot of people here. Surprisingly, people are happy because of a big Indian festival in life.
For me, I think I understand.
I just realized now that you mentioned
Diwali is coming, yeah. So, Malcolm, you're the agile expert, man. What is interesting?
I would call myself an expert, but
You're still part of this team? You're still part of Martha's team or Sudhir?
the part of the TST. So, to me, a retrospective is when a team gets together, aspirin, talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and try to figure out ways to improve the process moving forward. That's my short summary. All right.
I had a question. What's your capacity? What is your role?
I'm a business analyst.
Yeah. I'm a developer. And we have been following Agile for 2 years now. And as you mentioned, retrospective has been a place where we reflect on what we did last year.
Really good.
But we do have a lot of challenges in our team. Our team that I work with is where
are a way for a team
all of
to be
the
able to
action items
collaboratively
that
say
come out
we're
of
going to
these
change.
retrospectives.
And we're going to do some things.
Never get probably 1 out of 5. So it's like
so that they can improve.
it like accumulates over a period of time, and then a lot of issues
improving
that we face in the sprint.
And I think for me and my
I mean, we
experience,
operate in a
they
mode
don't need to have it as a ceremony.
Right? So then we go get it to the mode of
It is good to have a practice,
trying to do the same things again and again.
They will naturally realize
Things
we
like
need to
that.
have a retrospective.
So we speak about it in
call it at any
retrospective, like,
time.
we face a lot of these challenges. Then we never do anything solid about it.
Let me stop you one second. Do you guys talk about, see, there's a one thing which is Christian effect, environment. But what do you talk about your internal processes? Like whether it's a process you can improve internally. This is about what efficiencies you can bring internally in your process. So do you talk about that in perspective?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the points covered in a retrospective, we are trying to talk about what we are following, what went well, what didn't go well, and things like, how we can improve our refining and really talk about like the stand-ups
like right now.
It's just that,
But yeah, a lot of times, some little things
action
come up
items
and we have a channel where everyone can just log.
end of the session that comes out, you never get.
So what we do, I don't know if you guys do this already, but as we're going through patch, when it comes out, you can just rep through and you log it basically right there, and you can see it, and then you get the volunteer who's gonna take lead on this action item. And then at the end of each retrospective, we'll just spend a short amount of time following up on the action item from last month. This is action completed, and then you follow up needed, and then at least on the tools, you check it off if it's done. If not, you know if it's, we always revisit that.
Perfect.
At the end,
So basically before you start, you visit the old action items in the last
we
retrospective.
actually do that at the, I think we do it at the end of it right now. But
How many of us know what happens when somebody raises hand or any speaker raises their hand? Do you know what that is? You want to know? Okay, sure. We will go over that. So if you go to any Agile conference, you will see somebody standing on the stage, and they will give you a session to talk about something for like 5 minutes. And after a while, you will see suddenly the speaker raising their hand. Right? What that means is to get your attention. That means if you have 400 people sitting in one huge room, as a speaker, you can keep on shouting, but you will not get anybody's attention. So this is how you do. You raise your hand, and if any one person sees someone raising the hand, other person will raise the hand too. So it's a chain reaction which goes over in the room, and suddenly speaker got attention from everybody in the room. So it's a good crowd management technique. If you want to utilize it, and I will be utilizing that too. Because my voice is not that heavy, so I don't want to shout, so I just raise my hand. And if you see my hand in the air, try to raise your hand so that everybody can see. But this room is small, but again, we can utilize that technique also. Okay, so I see you guys have good discussion in your group. So let's talk about what retrospective is. How about we do shout out on what you think retrospective is?
A reflection of the previous sprint.
Reflection of previous sprint, sure. What else? What else you discussed in your group?
What challenges you are facing with retrospective?
Okay. So what if I have to short it in one single statement? Can I say this? Right? How about this? Right? So in short, if I have to explain what retrospective is, it is all about inspection, identifying, and then create. Inspection means whatever you did in your previous sprint. Identifying means you figuring out what went well, what did not go well, and what we need to improve. And then you're creating in the order. What is more important for a team, what is more important for an organization to work on as an improvement. And then you create a plan to work on that improvement. So this is whole retrospective. It is an event which happens after a period of work. Second, team takes a step back, examines the way they work, and if at all there is something which they need to work on, they will prioritize that, identify that, and then pick any one or two, create a plan to improve it, and move further to next sprint. In short, this is what retrospective is. So let's talk about challenges. What challenges you have faced? How many are Scrum Masters? 1, 2, 3. Or others, team members or? Okay, team member. So what challenges you have faced in your retrospective? Let's start with the team members.
So the challenge is the third part that you mentioned, that creating a plan to improve is
Creating plan to improve, sure.
and
Okay.
executing that plan is the challenge.
What else? Anybody else?
I'll piggyback on what he said. We had the issue where we come up with a bunch of things and then we have trouble following through. You know, so creating a good plan, following it.
Okay. How about if I say this? Have you ever feel when you go to your retrospective, your team members are disengaged, they are not even listening to you as a Scrum Master, and if at all you're sitting in a retrospective as a team member, nobody is listening to you, or there's somebody playing on the phone, they're not engaged at all. How about if I say retrospectives are boring? Yes, no, maybe. As a team member, I don't want to go because it's waste of my 30 minutes or 1 hour. Why should I go? What's there for me? Why should I go? How about if I say blame game or compensation? Have you ever seen this happening?
Yeah.
Right? It happened when I was working for one of the clients. One guy just got up and said, "Hey, don't blame me for that. It's not my thing." And this can see that there's a very thin line between a good retrospective and a bad retrospective, and bad retrospective can turn to this blame game. And as a Scrum Master, we'll have to be very cautious about when to step in and stop a discussion so that it will not convert to a blame game. What if I say painful? Why it is painful?
You have to kind of dig deep and see what you did wrong. And again, you have to find a very delicate way to let somebody else know without offending them that this is what you have done wrong.
Right. Painful. Retrospectives can become painful for somebody else if you start digging deep, as you mentioned. Why did you do this? Why did this happen? And as a Scrum Master, as a facilitator, or as a team member, I'm just not talking about Scrum Master or maybe a coach. I'm talking about everybody. You will have to be very careful about what words you want to use so that this thing will not happen. This periodically happens everywhere in most of the retrospectives. How about if I say waste of time? Most of the team members will feel that hey, it's waste of time, I don't want to come. How about this? How many of you have faced this? You can join anybody on the table if you want. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
How about, I don't think you have seen this, but see. How about this one? Does your team do retrospective? Yes, no, maybe? No retrospective?
It just become a routine, then the purpose of it. After some time, sometimes it loses the purpose. You just do it as a ceremony just to get it over.
Okay. Well, I will share my experience. I was working from a client and my team said, hey, I don't want to do retrospective. And I went to the leadership and management and said, hey, my team says no retrospective. What you want me to do? As a Scrum Master, I can force them. I can tell them, hey, this is the ceremony which you have to do. But management said, if team doesn't want to do, why you want to enforce it? Is it right or wrong?
Right?
Is it right?
Team,
Okay. What, how about somebody else?
I think
No, that's good.
Well, I think that it's the way you explain it also. I mean, I've run into people who don't want to do the retrospective either, but when you try and understand, well, why don't you want to do the retrospective? You keep thinking they're boring and everything like that, or they're wasting time. Well, why don't you come to the next one and we'll see if it's boring. Why don't you participate? You're going to get more out of it if you participate. You have to find other ways to explain to them that this is important and that their input is valuable.
Right. And precisely the point when it happens, you will, as a Scrum Master, you have to go and ask why you do not want to do retrospective. And if at all they say we don't want to do retrospective, it's a team decision, you cannot do anything. All you have to do is accept that choice because it's team's choice and not having any retrospective for them. But you will have to step in and figure out why it is happening, as you mentioned.
Well, one more thing to add is that I've seen teams try to cover the software things and the process things. The product demo happened, something happened wrong in that perspective, or they try to see why this year went wrong, why this went wrong. Instead of the process, they like to look at the development work itself. So that's one thing I think to draw a line, like where to stop it. It's a more process based and not the development based.
Right. And most of the times,
Probably show the positive side of that, right? All the good things that can be accomplished by having the retrospectives. So what if have we done? What if we haven't have it right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and probably letting them know that hey, you are missing something. So until they figure out the value of doing any event, if at all they are utilizing Scrum framework. If they will not find the value of any ceremony of event, they will not do that. Same thing will happen with your daily Scrum. Same thing will happen with demo. If they, as a team, they are not realizing the value of that event, they will not do it. So let alone retrospective, any event. It could happen to any event. So coming back to retrospective, we discussed all that team is disengaged, they are not doing retrospective, they are painful, they are boring. Why that happens? One of the reasons is lack of focus. Management cannot bring focus to their sprint's objective. As a coach or Scrum Master, we are not able to bring focus what they want to achieve, or product owner not able to tell the team that hey, these are the sprint, these are the user stories which you need to deliver. So lack of focus. Other one, lack of participation. When you go to retrospective, only Scrum Master is talking. That's it, nobody else. So that creates little disengaged audience and nobody wants to say anything? How about lack of genuine insight? Nobody knows what they did. Nobody remembers. How many times it happens when you're, I think, how many are married? I will try not to use that example if you're not. Okay. So how many times it happens when you go back home after work and your wife says, what did you do all day? And I will be looking stars and like, I don't remember. It happens. So same thing happens with your team. Team is working diligently to deliver their user stories, and you go to your retrospective and you ask your team, hey, okay, now talk about whatever you did in your 2-week-long sprint. And your team will be like, I don't remember what we did. And you will be wasting 10 minutes, 15 minutes just thinking about whatever happened in the last sprint. So what do we need to do to avoid that? And we will look into it. How about lack of buy-in? We create a plan, we figure out that this is what you need to improve, but nobody agrees to do, as you mentioned. Right? We figure out a plan, but there is no execution. Nobody wants to do anything. So we will look into this, how can we generate a plan, how can we create insight, how can we gather the data. Lack of follow-through. This is what happens. This is the reason where team says that we do not want to do retrospective. Because you are doing a one retrospective, you figured out that, okay, this is something which we need to improve, but there is no follow-through on that next sprint. Scrum Master coach, they say, okay, this is what you need to improve, but nobody wants to follow through on that. You come back on next retrospective, nobody talked about whatever we decided in last retrospective, have we improved on that or not? So team will think, okay, if there is no follow through, then why should I waste my 1 hour in doing retrospective? Why should I sit in there? So, do you know what this is? Matthias will know. Who knows what this is? Nobody?
No.
Okay, Matthias. Don't tell me you don't remember.
It's the
I will save you some trouble. That's okay.
okay.
So you can think if you want.
It's the part of your brain that is like I don't know.
Is it just
Non-dominant?
Yes, that's the right word. There you go. So pinky brain, the reason I call it pinky brain because it's the size of your pinky. If you put it right in here behind your head, that's where your pinky brain is. Pinky brain it's kind of a watchman. That means it lets your conscious brain know if at all something good is happening. If it is not good, pinky brain will tell your conscious brain, hey, you can go and sleep, that's okay, I'm here. If at all something good is happening, I will let you know, I will wake you up and then you can pay attention. Otherwise, you can just sleep. Human brain is designed for efficiency. And this is how human brain preserve energy. So pinky brain is something which will let your conscious brain know that, okay, now you can get up. Now you don't have to sleep, you have to pay attention. So example, when you start driving from your home to work, do you realize how you're driving, or you're thinking about your kid, you're thinking about your wife, you're thinking about your girlfriend? Do you think about, I have to take a left turn, now I have to take a right turn? You already know what it is. And if you're driving for long, you will start sleeping. Why? Because your brain wants to preserve energy. But at the same time, if you see somebody crossing the road, you will hit the brake. Because pinky brain will wake your conscious brain and tell, hey, somebody's here, put the brake on. That's what it is. This is the main reason where your team comes to retrospective and they start feeling boring. If it is routine work, in your retrospective, all they do is just talk about what they did well, what they did not do well, and what to improve. It's a routine work for them. Same as human brain. If it is a routine work for you to go from your house to work, It's a routine work and your brain will sleep. Same thing will happen with your team member. If you're doing the same 3 things again and again, they will lose interest and they will sleep in your retrospective. So as a coach, as a scrum master, or as a team member, you have to figure out multiple ways to do retrospective. If you have utilized one way to do retrospective for one sprint, change it up in next sprint. Try to be more creative. So we will be creative in this session today, so that this pinky brain is not kicking for us, and we will not sleep in this session. You get? Okay. So I will explain this activity real quick. This is the table, and we will be moving little gems. If you have one of those tables, it will be going from one person to another person, from that person to another person, and then from that person to another person. We have 3, so we will work it out. And it will start from one corner. It will go all the way in here. We will have 1 minute, and then you will see how many marbles we are able to move from one person to another person, from the start to end. And we will count on that.
Have to end.
Starting. Well, if you're starting with this person, it will end on the last person.
Okay, all right.
Not counting. Now, we will have 1 minute. You cannot start second marble in the game unless the first marble, which is already in the game, is reached its destination. Right? Okay, good. So we will be counting how many we're able to move. You will have 1 minute. And if you are running out of those marbles, let me know. I will quickly grab one more in there during our game. Okay. So we will start in. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Well, so any questions we have about the activity before we start?
Does it have to be one at a time?
One at a time.
Does it matter how we move them?
It's up to you guys to figure it out. All I want is one marble to move to all hands. That means each person should touch that marble. You cannot you cannot have 2 marbles playing in the game at the same time. You have to start one, finish, then start another, then finish, and then third one. Any other question? No? Okay, perfect. So let's say we'll start in
We just have to
3, 2, 1, go. You have 15 seconds.
faster? Yep. Good.
Alright, we're done. Okay, now we have to count how many we're able to do. So we have to do.
Marbles made us game. We already put the marbles in the table.
Yeah.
We won. We already put them on the table. So we're going to move it fast.
Yep.
37. 37?
Oh, man, less people. We have less people.
Okay. 2.
21.
21.
44.
24.
44.
44. Oh,
Let's change the score.
how was it? Is it boring?
Yeah.
After a while?
Yeah.
Now think about from a team's perspective when they are just working on user story and they're trying to deliver, what will happen to them? They will feel the board exactly the same way as a scrum master or as a coach or as a leader, figure out a way how can you motivate them in the middle of a sprint. Exactly the way I was just sitting in here, I was not doing anything, but I felt Matthias was bored, that team was a little bored. What the hell is happening? Right? So, and there is a reason we did this exercise, and we will look into that, why we did this. And this session is about 3 Musketeers. We haven't touched Musketeers yet. They will come way back in the session. And by the time if you're sleeping, I will wake you up, don't worry. Okay. So, for making your retrospective better, there is a way which is given by Astor Derby, and this is a very famous book on retrospective. If you want to go and read, by Astor Derby and Diana Lawrence. And they did a workshop in Google in 2007, and based on that session, they created a book. And that book is so famous. In that book, they have written 5 steps for a better retrospective. The first step is set the stage. So whenever you are leading a retrospective, you are facilitating a retrospective, you have to set the stage for them. You have to let them know what you want to achieve out of that retrospective. Second is gather the data. You gather the data from the team. But sometimes what happens is team will not do anything. They will just sit there and they will not help you in gathering the data. And we will talk about how can we mitigate that step. The third step is generate insight. Whatever data you have gathered, you generate insight on that. And we have decide what to do. We figure out of whatever we have worked upon, we have an insight on, we figure out what we need to do. And then last step is wrap up the retrospective. Now, set the stage. Why we want to set the stage? We want to share the plan for the event. We want to let them know that after this 60 minutes of session for retrospective, this is what we want to achieve after that. We want to establish a focus. We want to let them know whether we want to work on your technical stories, we want to work on our business stories, we want to work on collaboration, we want to work on team building, what we want to do. So we have to set up a focus for them. We have to establish a focus for them and let them know that this is why we are doing retrospective. Revisit working agreements. If at all you have to revisit your definition of done, definition of ready, or team collaboration, anything. This is the time when we do that. Gather the data. We want to create a shared pool of data. We want to create our retrospectives based on facts, not opinion. So if somebody says that, hey, that sprint didn't go well at all, why? That is your opinion. Where is the data? So we will want to ground our retrospective based on facts, not opinion. Consider objectives and subjective experience. Also, focus determines what data is relevant for a particular retrospective. Now, if we go back, we will look at when we set up our focus for a retrospective. If we set up for our focus to improve our velocity, that will determine what kind of data you want to gather. If you say that we want to improve on our team collaboration, you have to figure out what data you want to gather for that. So gather data will be coming from your focus, what you want to achieve out of that retrospective. Then this is generate insight. I apologize for that. This is for generate insight. We will share awareness. We move beyond habitual thinking, understand systematic influences and root causes, and observe pattern. This is how we gather the data. Then we decide what to do. We have moved from discussion to action. We know what to focus on. We have data. We have insight. Now, using those 3 things, we move to action rather than just discussing. We agree on 1 or 2 improvements. what as a team we want to work on. And last thing, which is very important, we focus on what team wants to accomplish. Not as a coach or as a scrum master or as a leadership, we want them to accomplish. And that's where the key thing is for your retrospective, where team feels that they can improve whatever they feel is important for them. Not for coach, not for scrum master, or not for the organization. Now when we let them do that, they feel little empowered and they are very happy coming to your retrospective, not bored. And then wrap up. When we wrap up retrospective, we identify ways to make retrospective better. Talk to the team and figure out how the retrospective went, and if at all there is a need to do something else in retrospective, try to gather the data for that. Reiterate action and follow up. When we say reiterate actions and follow up, that means when we were setting this stage, at the same time, we let them know that, okay, this is what our focus was, and based on our discussion, this is what we will be improving, and what are the follow-up actions? How we will be following up in our sprint. Every day, if it only we work on team collaboration, how we will be measuring that. And appreciate contribution. Most of the time we feel like team member share their insight, but we are not appreciated. So appreciate for collaboration, appreciate to share the data, whatever they have helped in improving the data sets or collaboration, or if at all they came up with a game for retrospective. Appreciate them. Now most of the time retrospective fails in these two things: set the stage and gather the data. We're not able to let them know that for this retrospective, this is the focus. We want to improve on our velocity, we want to improve on our sustainability, we want to improve on team collaboration. We do not have a set focus by which we will say that this retrospective is successful. And based on that, we do not know what data we need to gather. And when we are not able to do this, retrospective fails. The question is, how can we do that? How can we set this stage, and how can we gather data for a particular team and help them improve their delivery for user stories? Now that's where comes in picture two important words which are measurement, and let's see what measurement is. Do you know what measurement is? What is measurement?
Comparison.
Measurement, comparison. Okay. We'll need to talk about
Comparison
that.
against some standard.
Okay, I think what you're talking about is metric. But what is measurement?
Quantifying,
Dimensions?
Dimensions. What you said?
quantifying giving numbers to, associating.
Quantifying. Yeah. Okay. What else? So when you go to a tailor, what tailor does?
It's exercises. He's sizing.
Right. That's measurement. If you go at one particular time and take a temperature, then that will be a measurement. Now using that, you create metric. So measurement is a data set which you can get at one particular time. If you keep on measuring and use that data, you create a metric. Now this helps you improving your retrospective. How? We will look into that. Now look at this, and if I tell you these are measurements, does that make sense right now as it is on the screen? If I tell you point number 1 was measurement at some point, point number 2 was measurement at some point, and similarly I plotted all the data what I gathered, but does it give me a perception on what's going on? Now it's starting to give me a perception what this is. So you can gather the data all you want for your team. You can gather velocity, you can gather number of stories they are delivering, you can gather whatever you want. But that gathering data will not make any sense unless you try to create a metric out of it. That's what it is. You can measure anything you want, but unless you try to put up in a perspective, try to create a metric, it will not make any sense. Any questions before we move forward?
Whenever you go to retrospective, right, the idea is to see what happened in the last sprint. And now what you are saying is that focus on one topic, like collaboration or velocity, what you want to change. But logically then, we might miss on some item that didn't happen last sprint you want to work for. But logically when you go to retrospective, you try to cover everything that happened last sprint you want to improve upon, instead of focusing on one topic. So how to ensure that if we focus on one topic, still those things that we didn't focus on come up somehow.
So when we say that you have to set the stage, you have to set the stage for the team to let them know that this is what we want to work today. And you will be keep on doing it again sprint by sprint. But the focus will be that pick one thing. There is a famous saying that if you want to step on two boats, you will lose both the boats. If you want to chase two rabbits, you will not be able to chase, or you will not be able to get any one rabbit, right? So that's why we want to let them know that in this retrospective, the focus is to improve on this. Be it anything, pick it from the team. And if at all they feel that, okay, this is not the right thing which we want to do right now, okay, then ask them what they want to improve. But before we move forward to set the, to gather the data and generate insight, we want to figure out what the focus is. Because if you don't know the focus, how you will get the data, how you will get the measurement. And if you do not have measurement, how will you create your metric and figure out the trend?
But could you do a retrospective where you use a technique to gather the data within the retrospective? I know in my experience, when I'm setting the stage for my team was just doing a basic overview of what happened in the previous sprint. And you know, we may call out some things. We attempted to deliver this. We had this many, so many story points. We had to deal with these many different risks. We were able to mitigate, you know, just at a very high level overview. And then one technique that I've used is I've used a picture of the sailboat to gather data. And just we, instead of what went well and what didn't go so well, we talk about what were some of the things that held us back. What were the anchors in our sprint? What were the goals that we were trying to reach? You know, what was pushing us along? It was just the wind. And I have each of the team members come up with those things on their own, and then we go and put them on the board, and then you can start to see the data coming out based on their responses. And then we determine what we're going to focus on, and then we take it through a couple more steps. So when I'm gathering data, I'm usually gathering data right then and there with the team versus looking at something like a chart of our velocity or something like that, unless there was something really, really, really super specific that they wanted to work on. So, and I think we've had maybe one retrospective where the team said, hey, we want to talk about this during retrospective, but it was them coming up with
right. And with this, we are not going away from whatever you just mentioned. We're still doing that. We will still be doing. So what you mentioned, you set the stage for your team. You let them know that this is what we are doing. This is why we are in here, and you also let them know that we want to get away with some action item, right? So you set the stage for them.
Right.
After that, you move into gather data when you talk to them and ask them, okay, how this happened, why this happened, and other stuff.
Right,
And then you started generating insight,
right.
right? So we're still doing the same thing, but after a while, if team is doing the same thing again and again, what will happen?
Well, yeah, we never have the same retrospective twice. That we don't do. Yeah.
Right. But most of the teams does the same thing again and again.
Yeah.
And the problem comes like team stops coming to retrospective. And that's when we talk about these three things, what this session is about, three musketeers, and we will go over that to remove that dependency, right?
So just one point to mention that she said like we do the same thing, gather data at the time of retrospective itself. What I'm getting from your message that gather data before retrospective.
Gather the data before retrospective, yes.
But don't we, all of us, like in my past, we only gather data at the time of retrospective itself. In the meeting itself. We don't ask for data in advance, we just meeting.
Right. So this one, and I think you got my point pretty clear, and that's what we will be looking into. Those three musketeers are basically to help you as a Scrum Master, that what you can do for the team to improve.
Okay.
And you will still be doing that gathering data stage in your retrospective.
Okay.
But this is for you to help generate insight for yourself, what you need to do before the retrospective.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Now considering whatever we have done, moving our marbles in last activity, what do you think the last number will be? That means for table 1 it was 37, for table 2 it was 21, for table 3 it was 44. So if at all I have to ask as a product owner, how many stories you can deliver for a particular sprint, let me rephrase, how many marbles you can move from one person to another person in 1 minute, what this number will be, what you will commit to.
You're saying for each team, how many?
Yeah, for each table. So earlier when we did that activity, this table was able to move 37 marbles, right? Now you know what you need to do. You have experienced it. You know how can you move quickly. If at all I have to ask after activity 2, how many marbles you will be able to move, what that number would be.
How many higher?
Yeah.
How many do you need?
You told me, because you are experienced. So now I'm working as a product owner. Now I'm just sitting in here. I'm saying, okay, we have this product backlog. You have that product backlog. Out of that product backlog, how many stories you can deliver? That's what I'm asking. So I will rephrase. How many marbles you can move in 1 minute? So let's start with table 1. What do you think?
Promise, over deliver.
35.
Do 20 and do a stretch goal.
24.
They moved it and we have
40?
good quality.
Right. Under
Okay.
promise, over deliver.
The way we moved it,
What do you guys
the
think?
product, the way.
I think, no,
20.
do 20 with a stretch goal of 4.
We had it in the back.
20?
Now we got
20 with a stretch goal of 5.
25?
We want to maintain the good quality.
Okay. 60. What do you guys think? How many?
So you're the tiebreaker. Same 44.
44? Same? Okay. Alright, so we have commitment. Now we will see how our delivery is. So let's put that to work. You will have 1 minute and you're missing a 3 members. You want to start right now? Okay. You can start in 3,
So we get a lot more.
2, 1, go. That would be the
No to Baba's can again, right? You have to wait for him to put it there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No to Baba's can again. Yeah. Only I will push it when Martha is. I can't push it from Martha is.
Don't delay.
I'm waiting for Martha to touch it.
No, don't delay.
I have to get to Martha. This is the touch it.
Thought that was one. It's a broken one.
We are going down on quality there now.
Alright, last 5 seconds. Two, one, and done. Okay.
That story has to be carried on.
Yeah.
Break some rule of do marble again.
Oh boy.
Oh, nice. Okay.
How much marble?
Yeah.
44, 43, 43,
43. Okay. So, for this session today, we have the data now to look at our 3 musketeers. And the first musketeer which we are going to discuss is commitment reliability. Now, as a leadership or maybe as a coach, you feel very stressed when a leadership comes to you and say, hey, why this team is not able to deliver? They committed this, they're not able to deliver this. Why? And what answer you have? Or what, as a coach, what you will tell them? That's biggest question. And when you try to tell this to team that, hey, you're not able to deliver your commitment, they will say, no, that's not true. We committed these number of user stories and we delivered every time, every sprint. And they always have an upper hand because they are a team member. And you cannot enforce that, whatever you are saying, because you are a coach. You are a servant leader. You are not a dictator. So you have to have a data. How you gather the data is commitment reliability. And what commitment reliability is? Commitment reliability is basically comparison of your commitments and deliverables. So for table number 1, they committed for 40, they delivered 50. If I take a percentage of it, I will get a commitment reliability. So somebody is good with math can do this real quick for us.
That's more than 125%. More than 125%.
So if I say it is 125, is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. For this, for table number 2,
160.
160.
160 plus 1. Yeah, 160 plus.
Okay. I trust you. How about table number 3?
1.35.
How much you said?
135.
135, okay. So, you have this. And this is basically just a percentage of delivery versus commitment. And imagine how much data you will have for this when you're doing for each and every sprint. You will have this for sprint number 1. I will try to have this in here. And this is only for commitment reliability. Sprint 1, you have 125. Sprint 2, you have somewhere here. Sprint 3, you are somewhere here. Sprint 4, you are somewhere here. So you are trying to build a graph like this. Every time it's going down, in retrospective, you have a data. What happened? why your commitment reliability went down rather than going up. So imagine how much information you will have if you keep on doing this, sprint by sprint. As a Scrum Master, you will have the data or team to let know that, okay, you delivered 125% of your commitment. Good. What if this is only 10%? When you go to your retrospective, you can set the stage saying, okay, today we'll be just working on how can we improve our commitment. Is it because our backlog is not good enough? Is it because we have stories with unfinished acceptance criteria? Why our commitment is just 10% for this particular sprint compared to earlier sprint where it was almost 200%? Why? So you can have that discussion with your team if you have this in your hand. Any questions?
Nowadays, team does commit less, right? Because they don't want to fail on sprints. They do. Commitment could be less, and you always achieve your 200% of reliability if you just put less storage to start with.
That's okay. But I think I'm missing the point there.
I think what you're saying is that if you keep taking that measurement, and your teams will get the idea that, well, hey, if we know we can deliver, I don't know, 50 story points, but or we're always committing to 50 story points and we don't quite finish, well, let's commit to far less.
Far less, and then we'll
Even though we know we have the capacity to do 50 story points, we're going to commit to 25 and always hit our goal, so it's always 100 or 125%.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've polluted the data a little bit.
Now, I think one thing which we missed, and thanks for asking that, this is number of user stories. This is not the user story points, and we know the difference, right? We know the difference between stories and story points and velocity. So this is just number of stories. How many stories you committed, how many stories you delivered. So that question is kind of not relevant. Because what you're trying to achieve, or you're trying to find with this is how many stories you committed and how many stories you delivered.
I want to add a point here. Committing less and achieving that consistently is a good thing for morale perspective, but it always sets the stage where you never know what's your limit. Mm-hmm. And when you don't know your limit and when you don't fail often, what you're not doing is you're not identifying your how you can be efficient. For example, let's say you have a sprint and then you just commit for, let's say, 5 stories, and then you consistently do that for like 4 sprints, just doing 5 stories, and then you realize that you're actually doing more of business analysis, requirements, writing more acceptance criteria than actually doing work. So you're not focusing on identifying an issue here where we don't have upfront requirements. I'm just giving one example.
Oh, and
then you're not addressing that problem.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very good example.
So instead, just go all out, fail, and then identify why you failed. Mm-hmm. So that's my take on.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes, just to expand your example, sometimes what happens when you go to retrospective and you're consistently hitting this as 100%, and if you try to create this metric using that measurement, this will come as
straight line.
Mm-hmm. What this tells me as a Scrum Master that, hey, this team is cooking the data. Something is going on in here. Because this is not ideal. This is not you work. Something will eventually happen and your commitment will drop. It will go up, it will go down. Something will happen. If it is straight line for more than 4 sprints, that means you know something is happening and you have to dig deep and understand why this is happening. Whether this is because of team is trying to achieve just 100% every sprint, Okay, if this is real, that's fine, but you have to understand that why this is happening.
What about the situation where, I'll explain it this way. My recent team, they were, we measured story points and all that, but they were taking in a large number of stories at the beginning of our product increment. But we were getting ready to deliver a feature, and we're winding down the amount of stories that we're actually working on, because it starts out really big, and then as we're finishing things, and we're only focused on delivering this particular feature. So I had my my program manager come to me, and he asked, "Well, Pam, how many stories did the team finish this particular iteration? I need that measurement." And I said, "Oh, well, we finished X number of stories." He says, "Oh, but that's so much less than when you started. You had all these stories. Was somebody sitting idle?" And I said, "No, nobody was sitting idle. It's just that I might have smaller stories or a smaller number of stories, but my story points might be still kind of high." What about those situations where you're going along in a team and you may take in 10 stories in this iteration for a certain number of story points, but next iteration it might be 5 stories, but the story points might be higher because those stories might be larger. It's just how the work falls.
Sure.
I get a little nervous when we start taking these measurements and it's just looking at the number of stories, or it's just looking at story points. I spend a lot of time with my senior leadership saying,
Sure.
don't just look at one or the other. You've got to look at the whole
picture
of what's going
Right.
on.
So with this, let me answer one question where you said,
Sorry to interrupt you.
well, we're on time, and you asked 2 very good questions. Number one, when your leadership asked that they delivered these number of user stories in past sprint and way less in this sprint, that means you have this metric. If you're taking that, you have this metric, right? You have the answer already why that happened. Because when you go to retrospective, if at all it was this high in sprint 1 and this low, you are having that discussion with the team, so you know what happened in the team. If at all it is because they haven't had healthy backlog, because they haven't had good acceptance criteria, anything, reason could be anything, but you know as a coach, as a scrum master, why this happened for this team. So you can have that conversation with the leadership. Now, you say to look on the whole picture. This is not just one metric or measurement. We still have this one. This is just one musketeer.
Okay.
You will have one more to help you out with that. And we will look into it. As we mentioned, let's tag along with it. Musketeer number 2 is velocity sustainability. There is a difference, and I was speaking about this in DC Scrum user group, and there was one guy who got confused between 2 things: velocity sustainability and sustainable velocity. The 2 are different. Now, how these 2 are different? What is velocity? What is sustainable velocity? Let's go with that first.
The velocity you can maintain.
So sustainable velocity is basically a cruise speed. When you're driving on a high speed or on a highway and you put your car on cruise, like 50, that's where your sustainable velocity is, right?
Yeah.
And how you calculate that for your team? When you know that this team is consistently delivering these number of user story points. Now, this is user story points. This is not count of user stories.
Yeah.
This is user story points, right? So that is velocity, sustainable velocity. Velocity sustainability is if at all my team is able to sustain the velocity of last sprint. That means it's a comparison of 2 velocities. And here if I say table number 1, they committed, oh, well, let's see in here. So this will not come in picture. This will be out of our picture. We will just looking at this and this. This was sprint 1 and this was sprint 2. Right? We did 2 activities. Activity number 1 we have these numbers. Activity number 2 we have these numbers. So sprint 1 you guys had your, let's suppose 37 was the total velocity, not the user stories this time. So to give us a perspective.
Story points.
Yeah, just story points. And second sprint we had 53. Are we able to sustain our velocity? Yes. We are going above our velocity? Yes. If you calculate the same, it will come around 150 you said, right? Let's go with 150. So now you can have that discussion with your leadership that, okay, I'm able to sustain my velocity, I'm able to meet the commitment, percentage basis.
There's a very small sample size. The 2 sprint sample size is pretty small. So it should be across multiple sprints, right? Because things could change. Like 2 sprints maintaining something is easier than maintaining over the life cycle of the project.
Right, and you will be maintaining the same metric for velocity sustainability also.
But you said it's only for the last sprint, right? It's not for the last few sprints.
For the last sprint, that is for last sprint. That tells you the growth chart, right? Now the way I see it is when you go for doctor's appointment for your son, you go for 3 months, you go for 6 months, you go for 9 months. And your doctor will always compare the data with last checkup, not last to last checkup. And they will try to build up a growth chart based on your last visit. It's always the last visit. Same in here. You're trying to build up a growth chart for your team. You're trying to build up your data for your retrospective. So you always go what happened in the last sprint, not last to last sprint. Whatever happened, happened, but you try to compare with the previous sprint.
So what if my last sprint was pretty good, somehow it happened and we did an amazing job, and now this sprint happened normal, not as good as last sprint, but normal, and last sprint was amazingly high. So now data will show down. So I will be, so this velocity will be, I will not be able to maintain, I will say that for that month, for that sprint. Okay,
Yeah, that will happen, but you know why that happened, because you already mentioned, you in your question itself you mentioned why it happened because of some reason, right? And you know that reason, and there will always be outliers. So you have to figure out those outliers. And if at all this, considering these two, if your metric is going high, low, high, low, high, low, at certain point it will come like this. And that's where you will decide sustainable velocity. Velocity sustainability can help you reaching sustainable velocity. And if it all one sprint is high, next sprint is low, that means it gives you a talking point. What are those conditions which allowed us to go this peak? And why, because of those conditions, we are not able to deliver same velocity, but we came down. So you have talking points. In retrospective, you can generate insight easily using this. What you need to improve to sustain this velocity and sustain your commitment reliability. And all these things will not help if you do not have a healthy backlog. And that's where our third musketeer is backlog. You cannot measure commitment reliability. You cannot measure velocity sustainability if you have nothing in your product backlog. Taking the example of the activity which we just had, imagine I give you only 5 marbles. Will you be able to hit this? No. Will you be able to hit that? No. So you have to have a healthy backlog for your team. Now how you calculate healthy backlog? What you guys think what healthy backlog is?
The norm is two sprints at once.
2, okay?
Like basically you have a backlog for the next 2 sprints that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Groom backlog.
Groom backlog. Okay. What else?
You have stories that are ready if you needed to like move in, like you said, 2 sprints, but you have at least some stories that are in the backlog but not assigned to a sprint yet that you could move up.
Right. So all these answers are right. And all these points to the same thing, healthy backlog. Healthy backlog, this metric or this measurement, I always mix up. This measurement will give you a metric to create a trend, how healthy team's backlog has been from initiation sprint 1 to whatever sprint you are. This gives you a number, how many user stories you have in team's backlog, which they need to work on for a particular number of sprints. As you said, 2. This number will give you 2, that particular number 2, which will tell me that this team has 2 sprint worth work available right now in their backlog. Imagine if this is 0. You know in your retrospective that team does not have anything for next sprint. Team is free, they can go on vacation. You can go in leadership, say, hey, healthy backlog is 0, they have no work. If it is 13, you know team has a lot of work to do and they are not moving as quickly as they should. So this tells you each and everything, and this in coordination with commitment reliability, velocity, sustainability creates a full picture. How we calculate that? We calculate that by, so sprint 1 we had velocity 37, imagine, and sprint 2 we had velocity 53. We take average of this, will come with one number. You have product backlog, and then you have, and you mentioned groomed product backlog, right? So we'll talk about that. So you have user story 1, user story 2, and user story 50. Now out of all these, you have only few user stories which are groomed. When I say groomed, that means they are pointed. Let's say 5, let's say 8. So they are groomed. That means out of product backlog, we have 50 user stories, we have 10 user stories which are groomed. If we sum all these user story points, let's suppose it's coming as 100. And the average of these two, I'm not sure how much it will come, but I will just say, let's suppose it is 50. If I divide this number will be 2. That means my teams can deliver whatever they have in 2 sprints. But this is only for the groomed backlog. Now, at this point, if you see in your retrospective this happens, that means this is the area where you need to work with your product owner. You have to work with your product owner to groom these user stories consistently. And if this number comes to, let's suppose, 5, that means something is wrong, if I see it. This number should be between 2 to 3. If they have 5, that means they have too much work already figured out what they need to do. And by the time they will reach to this user story, things will change. And they will have to go back, change the acceptance criteria again, and rework whatever they did. So that's what we do not want. That's why we adopted Agile. We're going back to same waterfall if you have this high number.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right? So this gives you that insight too, right there. And the best part of this is you can put a control limit, where you can let your team know if this is 160, we do not want to do that because you're asking your team to work so hard and you're overburning them if it is 160. So control limit, what I have done for my team is between 20 to 30%. If it is between that range, I do not want to have any discussion with the team. Be it less, be it high. If it is higher or less than this, maybe it is, if it is 40%, then I want to have a discussion why. Otherwise, just let it go. But it depends on the team's behavior, it depends on team's culture, how you want to have that culture built up in your team. So, conclusion. We have, this is a musket, everybody knows, right? We have one musket called velocity sustainability. Other one is commitment reliability, and we have backlog health. And everybody knows in retrospective we have 5-star model. Anybody doesn't know? Okay, we will look into that. That 5-star model says when you go to retrospective, you have to talk about what we need to start doing to improve ourselves, what we need to keep doing to sustain whatever we are able to achieve in our sprints, what we need to stop doing to improve, what we need to do more of to improve ourselves. We do need to work on our dependencies with the other teams frequently. We need to communicate something upfront. We need to work on our definition of done, definition of ready, or what we need to do more frequently to improve. What we need to stop doing or less of. And then what we need to put in a parking lot for further discussion. So this is the 5-star model. Now imagine if you do not have these 3 things with you. This will become a regular thing for your team. They will just give you something which you will not understand. If you have worked as a Scrum Master, you will know this happens very frequently. One answer you will get always in retrospective is communication. Communication went so good in this sprint. You will always get that answer in your retrospective. The second answer, which is more common, is collaboration. Collaboration was so awesome in this team. So you will get these answers very, very frequently. This star model was created to avoid that. And I created these 3 things on top of that, so it will give me more insight into the way team is behaving. And at particular time, what I need to talk about to see the trend. If they're going up, they're going down. If they're going down, why they're going down? Why they're not able to deliver what they committed? If they committed for 53, but they're delivering only 40, why that happened in the middle of the sprint? So what was it? What was the reason? And plus control limit, which is very important. You do not want to keep nagging them every time when they go down or they go up. You have to have a control limit with that. If it all, so same thing goes with my parent. My dad asked me that, hey, you should always get 90% marks in your exam. If at all I'm getting 89, will I get punished? If I'm getting 91, will I get punished? So you should have that control limit where you want to have that discussion with your team, where you need to interject yourself with the team and figure out the particular reason why that happened. And if my percentage was 70 and less, then my dad will come to me and say, hey, what happened? Why it was 70? Earlier it was 75 or 80, but why it came below 70? If it is 75, my dad will not come to me and not talk about anything. He's happy. He's as happy as I got 90. Same thing in here. If it is 100% or 90%, you do not want to disturb team. Let them do what they're doing. Eventually they will figure out by themselves and they will reach that 100% mark again. If it is going below your control limit, then yes, go interject yourself, talk to them, understand why that is happening. Alright, with that said, let's do a little.
Avinash, one thing, backlog health, necessarily all makes sense, but as she also mentioned, right, we have been told in many Scrum conference and things, don't go by stories, always go by story points. Because logic can matter, you cannot, because story points, as she said, 5 stories could be 50 story points, 10 stories could also be 50 story points.
Sure.
But your one factor community reliability is based on story points. No, sorry, not story point, but
Number
stories.
yes.
No, sorry. So then there's a disconnect than what we have heard till now and what you have told right now about community reliability.
Well, definitely. So velocity system, and as you say, we always tell them that do not go by the quantity. Right? You do not want to let the team know or let anybody know that this team is able to finish 10 user stories or 15 user stories. We do not want to compare. But when you convert them to percentage with the help of velocity, you're getting a whole different picture. This will not sustain by itself. Commitment reliability will not sustain by itself if you're not using it velocity sustainability. That's why there are three musketeers which help each other to improve team. If you just use commitment reliability and try to improve the team, you will not get anything. You might get insight why commitment reliability is falling, but how you want to utilize the other criteria to improve. Now these two things will not survive without a healthy backlog. If you do not have a healthy backlog, you cannot get these two things. So I agree with you, totally agree with you. You cannot rely on just one. You have to use this.
And also what's the difference in more of start doing, because we always use keep doing, start doing, stop doing, never thought of more of, less of. Because we said start doing is more like covering more of as well, or stop doing is covering less of as well. So why have these two separate in that perspective?
Let me think of a good example about that. I have to come up with an example for that, but this is basically something will work for a team and something will not work for a team. That means stop doing, start doing. In the middle, there is something which you let the team know that you are doing this pretty good, but if you want to improve more, let's say I will tell you about automation. Let's take automation, right? When you ask your team to create unit tests to deliver a code, whenever you check in, you want that unit test to automatically run for a build. Now, if you're doing that for once, you can start doing it, you can stop doing it, but you want to let them know that do that more frequently for each and every code. For one story they did, okay, you start doing it, but you stop too. But if they not keep on doing it, you will not get the value. So you have to be on that section more of. And then there is less off too. So something will fall off in there.
How sweet you want your coffee.
And then we have parking lot too. In retrospective, when you go, one team member says that this is okay for me, one team member says no, this is not okay for me. What you want to do with that two different perceptions, you put that in parking lot. So we do not have necessary data right now to discuss on it. Let's put in our parking lot. We will do sprinting for one more sprint and we will come back again and revisit whatever data we gathered from that sprint. So that's why we put a parking lot also.
Can I ask one more question, please?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So this is pretty good. So normally what I've seen people don't want retrospective is that they say we always take action items in retrospective, but we don't implement it, as you mentioned in the beginning. So then we said, okay, why don't we start retrospective with reviewing the action items from last retrospective and then take from there. But then the stage becomes second part. The first part becomes what we took action in the last retrospective, look at them and then start those. So what's the right way to follow up on the action items you took in the last retrospective?
So set the stage is also at the same time when we start to let team focus on the objectives we want to achieve after the retrospective. At the same time, you want to talk to them and do a follow-up on what you did achieve after the last retrospective. So that is also one kind of set the stage criteria.
And this list becomes increasing sometimes. We are not able to, let's say, action items keep increasing. We are not able to reduce them. I've seen that the list keeps increasing. We want to improve this, we want to improve that. So people have so many ideas.
Keep accumulating.
But that follow-up, as we mentioned earlier, that follow-up could happen anytime the whole sprint. You do not have to wait until the retrospective time to follow up on whether you are able to achieve your last objective or not. You can do that anytime in your sprint. Day 1, day 2, day 3, last day, you can do it anytime. And starting the current sprint's retrospective is your last opportunity to communicate that.
No, what I'm saying is that we take action items from last sprint. Somehow we are not able to work on them this sprint. We take 4 of them, we were able to work 2 of them. 2 became as more like open items.
Sure.
Next we again take 4. So again we go to 2, so now this becomes 4. So that's why the list of action items that we want to work upon keeps increasing, and then we said it's like
Right.
But that's good because that can become
If I
like a
can
backlog
go
in and
back.
of itself, right?
so that's why to focus on 1 or 2 items only to pick up.
let
That
me
way your
see.
team will never be sitting idle.
So that's why, if you see, decide what to do, agree on one or two improvements.
That's very important, that perspective. So, look, yeah.
We do not want to do more.
But he makes a good point though, and that's how I use it. When that list grows, because we've had that happen where we've had, 8, 9, 10 things on our, we gotta improve all these things. Okay, we're not gonna get all those things. Pick one, like you said. We do the pick one, but all that stuff does go to a parking lot. And when somebody is saying, oh yeah, I'm finishing early, I must have, missed, I thought it was gonna take me this long and it didn't, and I had some extra time on my hands. Well, if you can't help anybody else, well, guess what? I've got a retrospective backlog you can start working on. I'm telling you, it works, and you always have something
See
for
what
people to
improvements you
work
can do
on.
as a team.
Right, and it gives them also a way to say that they accomplished something else to help the team. So.
In here, I'm specifically looking for one particular idea, but if I can go back from here, that would be easy. So when we were looking at this slide, we looked at the three things which simplifies a retrospective: inspect, identify, and create. So inspection is where you inspect what went good, what went bad, and then you try to identify. At this step, you also try to order them. When you say order them, that means whatever will bring more value for a team will come first, then second, and then third. And out of that, you pick one which gives more value. You do not want to build up your backlog like your product backlog for your retrospective. You want to pick one. And once you have picked one, you try to achieve that, go back and build that backlog again. If you keep on doing that, we'll have the same problem. Now we have retrospective backlog, right?
And that happens, Tommy. That's a problem, the challenges we face here.